Welcome to the new Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski, and on today's show, we're talking about a two-tiered justice system. Should we start doing citizens' arrests? And are there really only two sexes? What are the experts telling us now? And we're finally seeing a state get a lawsuit against them for letting men participate in women's sports. And then there's Marc Zuckerberg, who wants more government, imagine that. And then finally, CPAC. Yes, I'm going to CPAC this year. I'm going to have a press pass talking to some of the biggest names in conservative politics in our country. And I want to know what you want me to ask some of these big conservatives' names. All that and more on today's new Book of Daniel podcast. Hello and welcome to the new Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski. I am your host on this adventure. And as I said, our first thing up today is talking about this, what I call a two-tier justice system. Should we start doing citizens' arrests? A couple of stories leading to this. First off is a story at uncoverdc.com from our very own editor-in-chief, Tracy Beans, talking about how Andrew McCabe and Loretta Lynch threatened the New York field office of the FBI. Yes, they did. This story has gotten big press coverage, even though it's kind of an old story. Tracy had it pinned on her Twitter feed as the pinned post for a couple of years, and it got many, I think over 1 million retweets, just people paying attention to it. But finally, since the news came out that McCabe wasn't going to get charged with anything, all of a sudden this is big news because McCabe, well, let's just talk a little bit about this. He leaked a story about this investigation on the Clinton Foundation to the Wall Street Journal. And then he lied under oath 4 times during his interviews about this situation, during his question. And the Inspector General and the Inspection Division of the FBI both said that he lied. Well, now he's getting off, right? He's not going to get charged. What's going on with that? I'm not going to go into this too much because I want you to go to read the story that Tracy has on uncoverdc.com. And I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes down below. And I'm going to link to Tracy's podcast on this down below. You may have already heard her if you're paying attention to the news. She's been interviewed, I think, probably 24 times already since just in the time this broke and me recording this. It's just a big story. So go ahead and look at the links, read the article, listen to her podcast on this. This is a huge story. And again, it begs the question. We have a system here where here's this guy who lied to Congress 4 times under oath, and he gets no sentence. And then you have Roger Stone, who got convicted of a process crime in his testimony about Donald Trump. And a process crime, basically, it was a gotcha crime. They set him up. They asked him a bunch of questions. He misspoke. He presented some facts, nothing criminal about it, just a process crime. And they're slamming him with a 9-year sentence. This is kind of a double standard in sentencing. This kind of stuff needs to stop, right? But now let me go on quickly to number 2 in our list of 5 things to talk about. And that is breaking news today. Chris Donaldson wrote about this over at the Federalist. Democratic senators held a secret meeting with Iranian leaders. There was a security conference over in Munich, Germany. And it's really, I'm just going to kind of go over this article. It's an astonishing example of just how far Democrats will go to undermine President Trump in foreign policy. They met in secret with high-ranking Iranian officials just last week. This is Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut who did this. He met with Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif in Munich. And if this report is true, and I do believe it is, it's more evidence that the Democrats have basically gone rogue in trying to stick it to Trump, right? Trying to undermine him. John Kerry's been doing this too. And why aren't these people getting charged under the Logan Act? It's just evidence of a 2-tier justice system. There's a tier for the peasants, you and me. If we drive 31 miles an hour in a 25 miles an hour zone, we get nailed with a ticket. But here these guys are violating federal law and no charges. I mean, they're laws. They're laws on the books, and nothing happens to them, even when we know that they're doing them. People are getting tired of this. Even this morning, I tweeted that in recent times, it's become very clear that there's a two-tiered system. Laws for the peasantry, laws for the elites. The peasantry gets enforced, the elites don't. And if we don't get this fixed, we really don't have a country. It's nothing but a farce. There is talk. I mean, I'm hearing talk from people that they are seriously looking into how to do citizens arrests so that when they run into McCabe or John Kerry or whoever, they can make a citizen's arrest on this person, because it seems our federal government can't seem to figure it out. How deep is the deep state? How deep is the swamp? It needs to be drained. I want to give a shout out to one of my Twitter followers, and I follow her back. It's Ann in Alabama, and I will link to her in the show notes too. She's got a great set of stuff that she tweets out. But I love her tagline on her Twitter account. She says, she has a quote from Maximilian Robespierre: "The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is keeping them ignorant." And isn't that the truth? Educating people. And that's what we're about at Uncover DC. That's what we're about in everything that I write about. I'm trying to educate people as to the truth of what's going on. It's why I did this podcast. I want to convey truth, because what we see in the legacy media is not truth. It's lies. It's spin. It's protecting people like McCabe and John Kerry. It's not giving you the truth of the situation. And I hear, like I did in my last podcast, I quoted all these movie stars who are quoting what they're hearing in the news. But what they're hearing in the news is lies. And so they're feeding lies to the people, and then people who follow these movie stars believe the lies. That should not be. Let me quote Ronald Reagan too. He said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in our bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." And amen to that. We've got to be protecting people, educating them about freedom. You know, here we got senators talking with Iranians, undercutting the process of our foreign policy. This should not be. I am also going to put in the show notes a link to a video that you can watch on Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime Video, this is a free video to watch. It's called Can We Talk About This? It is a documentary, but it's an hour and 13 minutes long. It has Pamela Geller, Mark Stein, Ayaan Hirsi, Robert Spencer, Paul Weston, Milo. I mean, there's all these people, and they're talking about what Islam is trying to do with Sharia law in this country. You need to be educated about this. If you are unaware of what Sharia law is about, and you have Amazon Prime, and a lot of Americans do, go watch this video. It's absolutely free if you have Amazon Prime. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. Learn what Sharia law is, learn what they're trying to do, and why they're trying to prevent us from talking about it. Islam says we can't talk about these things, and everybody's trying to be politically correct and hush-hush about it. This should not be. We need to be able to talk about this. So please watch this video. I strongly encourage you to do this. All right, let's move on to number 3 in our list of 5. Just how many sexes are there? This is kind of cool. And this is linked from CNS News. Mr. Michael W. Chapman at CS News penned this. He's quoting biologists writing in the Wall Street Journal. There are only 2 sexes, male and female, and there is no sex spectrum. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It says in a powerful commentary in the February 3rd edition of the Wall Street Journal, biologists Colin Wright and Emma Hilton explain that scientifically there are only 2 sexes, male and female, and that there is no sex spectrum. They also stress that biologists and medical professionals must stop being politically correct and stand up for the empirically reality of biological sex. Yes, 2 of them, male, female. Been that way for 6,000 years. We're just now figuring this out. With the phenomena of some men saying that they identify as women and some women saying they identify as men, or gender identity, or some combination therein. We see a dangerous and anti-scientific trend towards outright denial of biological sex, state the biologists. The notion that there is a sex spectrum where people can choose to identify as male or female regardless of their anatomy is irrational and has no basis in reality, say the biologists. And they go on, and I won't read all of this, but I will link to this in the show notes. Thank you, these biologists who are standing up and saying, enough of the political correctness, let's just be truthful about what we see as facts, empirical evidence. There are two genders. Everything else is sexual dysphoria, sexual confusion. And unfortunately, we've got a bunch of people in our public school system who are trying to push this thing, this idea onto our kids. I've seen kindergartners, videos of kindergartners getting all dressed in drag and saying that they're girls when they are a biological male. This must stop. We must bring back some common sense to our education. And if you have your kids in public school, can I strongly, strongly recommend you reconsider, and if you can possibly do it, choose homeschooling. There are homeschooling organizations in every state. You can contact, just punch up homeschooling in your state, go to the internet, punch up homeschooling in whatever state you live in, look for the organizations that can help. There's homeschool co-ops. You don't have to do it alone. We have friends at homeschool co-op. They take their kids to classes, and they go to classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays or Mondays and Wednesdays, and then they have homework, and they come back, and the parents teach the kids. You can teach your kids. We did. We homeschooled not only our own daughter, we homeschooled our two nephews, our nephew, our two nieces, and even a neighbor, because in the state where I live, you can do that legally. And so I strongly encourage you to do that. My daughter, when she was 16, she was finished up with high school, and she's going to college, and she's getting A's. So it's totally possible to do this. You can just teach your kids at their pace in a style that works for them. Strongly recommend educating in homeschool. But let me tack onto this another story, it's like 3.1 here. The Alliance for Defending Freedom is suing the state of Connecticut for letting trans girls compete in high school sports. These are boys that think that they're girls, trans girls. They're competing in women's sports, and these girls are missing out on scholarships because boys, that is human beings with male anatomy who claim that they're girls, are winning first and second place in these races, in these marathon runs, and they're getting the scholarships. This is not how life should be. So the Alliance Defending Freedom has filed a suit in federal court against the state of Connecticut, against the Connecticut Association of Schools, for its trans-inclusive policy towards student athletes. This is a story by Dawn Ennis over at outsports.com. I provide the link in the show notes. They're holding up signs at this press conference: fair play, protect women's sports, and rightfully so. They're fighting for these girls who are trying to work hard and compete against other girls, and going to regional championships by one place because some guy took their spot. This isn't fair. So I'm really glad for this federal lawsuit. Mike Ferris runs the Alliance for Defending Freedom. I've met Michael Ferris. He's a great human being. And by the way, you can support them if you want. Go to Alliance Defending Freedom website. I will link to that in the show notes as well. But he says girls deserve to compete on a level playing field. Forcing them to compete against boys is not fair. It shatters their dreams, destroys their athletic opportunities. So there really needs to be separate boys sports and girls sports. Title IX is Title IX for a reason. This is reversing so much advances that we've had for women in sports and women, and fairness for women. I'm surprised that women are not stepping up and fighting against this. I would say that this has to do with a lot of this tolerance as a virtue mantra that we see. Guess what? Tolerance is not a virtue. It's not. Can we tolerate differences of opinion? Yes. That doesn't mean we have to subscribe to them. We can just let you have your own opinion. We also don't have to endorse them. The left is famous now for teaching that tolerance is a virtue. And when I went through my doctoral studies, this was really pushed on us, that we need to tolerate other people's point of view and actually endorse and embrace them. And I'm sitting there in my classes going, what's up with this? But that's what they're pressing in the universities, and now has sunk down to the high schools and even the elementary schools as well. Boundaries are needed. Otherwise, here's what happens. If we teach tolerance as a virtue, that means to be more tolerant, to be more virtuous, you have to be more tolerant, right? More tolerant of more abhorrent behavior. So guys and women's sports, hey, we'll tolerate that. That makes us more virtuous. Guys in women's bathrooms, hey, we'll tolerate that. It makes us more virtuous. How about drag queen story hours for kids, for kindergartners? Yeah, that's pretty out there. We'll tolerate that too. We can be even more virtuous. You see how this works? The more tolerant you are, the more virtuous you are. Thruples. There's got a TV show now on thruples. 2 wives and a husband or whatever. We're not going to tolerate that. We're going to tolerate that too, so we can be more virtuous. The wilder it is, hey, the more virtuous we are if we tolerate it. So I just look at this as self-pride. I am prideful of myself that I am tolerant and therefore more virtuous. It's a very selfish thing. It needs to stop. We need to draw a boundary and say, enough. And we do that by educating people on the ripple effects of their actions. We got to speak sense to what's happening in our school system and take control back from the federal government, back to the states, back to local control, so that we as parents can have more and more speaking into what's happening into our local school systems. All right, let me briefly tell you that our podcast is sponsored by Workplace Excellence, which happens to be my company. If you would like to sponsor the podcast, or if you know somebody who'd like to sponsor the podcast, please let me know, because you're probably getting tired of me talking about my company, but it's who we've got, right? I am offering all of my listeners a very special screaming deal. You get a disc assessment and 2 hours of coaching with me, 2 coaching sessions with me for only $195. Just the other day, I did a disc workshop for about 30 people. It was a 2.5-hour session. They loved it. They learned all about themselves. I had so many people coming up to me afterwards and saying, thank you. They learned so much, and buying my books and all that kind of stuff too. And people signing up for the coaching. You can do so much with this disc understanding. If you understand yourself, your own behavioral style, you become better at self-management, work management, relationship management, and then that makes you more effective in the workplace, more effective in your marriage, more effective with your kids. So screaming deal, $195. Go to myworkplaceexcellence.com. Of course, if you don't want to spend $195 on that screaming deal, you can still support the podcast through our Patreon account. I link to that also in the show notes. Any amount per month is going to help very much, so that I can do these every day instead of just twice a week. So very much appreciate you guys supporting the podcast in whatever way you can. And if you do know somebody who wants to sponsor the podcast, please put them in touch with me. All right, let's move on to number 4 in our 5 list of things here. And that is a little bit of government waste happening in the state of Virginia. This was reported on WJLA.com, which is ABC 7. Mr. Sam Sweeney did this story in Falls Church, Virginia. Metro, which I guess is their organization for transportation there, has spent $3.8 million and have taken 5 years to build 2 bicycle racks, and they're still not done. I can't believe when I saw this story. They had originally budgeted $600,000 for each bike rack, which by itself seems a little high. They're building these covered bike racks that hold 22 bikes, $600,000. But that price after 5 years is now at $1.9 million per bike rack, and they're still not done. They were supposed to be done in December of 2015. Here it is, 2020, and they're still not done. They have all sorts of excuses. I will link again to this story. You can look that up for yourself. But, you know, we're talking about government costs here, right? I've got a friend, I live in Idaho, and I live in Boise, Idaho, which happens to be the state capital. I've got a friend who does contract work. He's a contractor. And he tells me that to work with the city is amazing. It's a lot of people that he knows scams the city on construction stuff. Because, and I'm just going to give you just one example. It's a very small, minute example, but it's a big example when you think of the percentages. He says anything less than $25,000, they don't have to get competitive bids for. They can just award the contract to whoever they want. And some of these contractors have friends who make these decisions, and they'll see a job and they'll recognize, well, that job only costs $8,000, $9,000, but they bid $24,000 on it and they get the job. And then they spend their $8,000, $9,000 to do the work and they pocket 15 grand. So there's corruption at every level. We're not just talking, small little town Boise here, but Falls Church, Virginia, spending all this money on bike racks. We're talking $20,000 per bike at this point, just to store a bike. Let's also talk about what happened when Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They came to President Trump and they said, look, it's going to cost us $1 billion to build an embassy in Jerusalem. And Trump goes, $1 billion? What's up with that? Now, keep in mind, Trump was in real estate, so he knows what's going on. He says, we can do it for less than that. Guess what? They spent less than $500,000 taking an existing building and redoing it. And then they've since awarded $21 million in security upgrades. All right, $21 million. They still saved $979 million from what they originally came to Trump and said it's what it's going to cost. You see how people just bilk the government because there's favoritism and corruption and graft going on all over the place. Needs to stop. Trump needs to drain the swamp. Speaking of government and the desire for more of it, we got Mr. Marc Zuckerberg, the founder of everybody's favorite Facebook. He says that he wants government regulation on social media. This is an article out of Breitbart, Lucas Nolan writing here. Facebook CEO Marc Zuckerberg has called for more regulations surrounding online content, saying that it's, quote, not up to social media companies to determine free speech. Really, Mark? Free speech is free speech. Okay. BBC News reports that Facebook CEO Marc Zuckerberg warned that during the Munich Security Conference in Germany, that excessive control of speech online risks stifling individual expression and free speech. Social media services such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram have been under intense pressure to crack down on hate speech. And Facebook has been harshly criticized for refusing to fact-check political ads. You know what? Political ads are political ads. I don't see anybody fact-checking political ads on TV. He says, we don't want private companies making so many decisions about how to balance social equities without any more democratic process. Zuckerberg urged governments to develop regulations relating to social media and suggested that a new regulatory system be founded that combined the existing rules for telecoms and media companies. In the absence of that kind of regulation, we'll all continue doing our best. He goes on to say that they have a team of 35,000 people at Facebook currently reviewing content. Well, you know what happens? Facebook just arbitrarily trashes your content. They just ban you and say, well, that was unreasonable. And they give you no way to ask what was unreasonable. They give you no way to ask, why did I get banned? Why was that? There's no check and balance with the source. They just arbitrarily just go, you know what? Unbalanced. I have had friends on Facebook who have been banned on Facebook for retweeting something, or reposting on Facebook, something that they saw somewhere else. They didn't even originally put it up. They just reposted it from somebody else, which you can do, right? And they got banned from Facebook. Rather than just the person who originated it getting banned and taking that post off, they actually banned this person too. Where is the fairness in that? Totally unfair. So we're going to have, I think if Mark Zuckerberg wants to fix things, he should allow some kind of communication that is less cumbersome. I actually opened up, I've got New Book of Daniel on Twitter, right? At New Book of Daniel. If you want to follow me on there, that's where you can go. But I opened up one for my business. And I was immediately, after 10 days, I was banned from Twitter. I hadn't even posted anything. I hadn't retweeted anything. I haven't made any tweets on it. And they banned me. And they said, you look like you're a spammer. I'm going, how could I be a spammer when I didn't even tweet? And I had to appeal, and they didn't answer. And then I had to appeal again, and they finally answered, and they reinstated me. But it took me, 4 days to get, and they gave me no reason. They didn't say why they thought I was spamming. They just arbitrarily said, well, you look like a spammer with no tweets. Hello. There needs to be a better way to appeal what's going on with our social media, a better way to talk to these people. And they need to decide if they are a platform or a publisher too. It's getting a little bit weird. So, all right. So there's our 5. I think I actually did it in 15 minutes today. And I want to wrap up by talking about CPAC because yes, through Uncover DC, I will be at CPAC with press passes. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to everybody who's going to be a speaker at CPAC. And the press kit hasn't come out yet. We're not told yet who's going to be available for interviews. But I would like to hear from you. What kind of questions do you think I should be asking these people when I'm at CPAC? I'll have the media booth there available to me, the Uncover DC media booth. So as people come through, these big political names, I'll be able to stop them and ask them some questions. I don't want to ask, stupid questions. I got a couple that I want to ask already, but I'd like to know if you have something that's serious. Don't give me any silly questions. Excuse me. Go ahead down below in the comments section. Tell me what you'd like me to ask. Just make it serious, right? We're not looking for humor here. Give me some serious questions. Or if you would prefer to email those questions to me, you're free to do that too. My email address is newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. That's newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. And by the way, if you want to read my stuff on uncoverdc.com, just go there, uncoverdc.com. And in the upper right-hand corner, there's that little magnifying glass, that little search thing. You can type in my name, Bobinski, and hit search, and everything that I've written will come up. You can read my columns there. Of course, we've got a lot of great columnists at uncoverdc.com. I am honored to be listed among them. Please visit there and read all the cool insights that we've got. And we are growing and expanding. We got some cool stuff in the works. Can't tell you about it just yet. And what else going on? I got a blog if you want to go there. That's the www.newbookofdaniel.com. And what else? Oh, I don't know. There's all sorts of ways to get a hold of me. But like I said, Twitter @newbookofdaniel. All right, that is our podcast for today. It is kind of short, thankfully. I got a lot of stuff cooking on my plate. So fast run through there with our 5 topics. If you have any questions, give me a call. Otherwise, you have been listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski, and I'll see you on the next show.